In this video, we will discuss about route constraints in ASP.NET Core Web API application. While working with routes in ASP.NET Core Web API application, we need to implement some logic. These logics are possible in routing because of route constraints. The route constraints are nothing but a set of rules that can be applied to routing parameters to restrict how the parameters in the route template are matched. Now, let's understand the concept of routing. I want to create a URL. Your parameter is ID. This ID must be integer and it should be less than 20. If the ID is 20 or above 20, then it will not reach the particular resource. Here, the entire part of the URL is same, but parameter should be string. In the third URL, we have to pass integer, but it must be greater than 20. In the first URL, we have to pass integer. In the second URL, we have to pass string parameter. How we can differentiate these URL? See here, these are unique URLs. This is possible in web application. We can handle all these scenarios by using route constraints. Let's understand about route constraints. The first constraint is a type. So we can use this type constraint to specify the parameter type. The different types of constraints are integer, boolean, date time, double, float and etc. Now go to Visual Studio. Here, to understand the concept of route constraints, let me add one more controller. Since we are using the same application that we have created in our ASP.NET Core video series, okay, right click on controllers folder, then click add controller. Here, choose API controller empty, then click add. Your controller name will be employee, then click add. Inside this controller, let's add one action method, public string get by ID. Um, Parameter type will be ID integer, then ID. Here we will return some text as an output. Let's say allow integer parameter ID value. That's it. Let's add route for this action method. Route your ID. Now create one more similar action method. Copy this and paste it below that. Here change the method name get by ID string and the parameter type string. Then output message allow string. Okay, that's it. See the base route here. First part is API, then controller name. After this base route, we have to append this ID. In this first method, we are expecting integer value. In the second method, we are expecting string value. Now, save and run this application. Update the URL. First part API, then controller name employee, then enter some integer value, let's say 15. See here, we are facing ambiguity error because we are using same route for two resources. That's why we got this error. Now go to Visual Studio, stop the execution. See here, we are using the same route for two resources. Now we can define type on variables. Here to assign the type, we have to use colon. Then type is integer. As you know that by default all the variables will be treated as string, so no need to define string here. Now save and run this app. Now refresh this page. Now we got the output from integer method. Now let's type some text, then press enter. Here we got the output from string method. This is how we can provide type for variables. Okay, next constraint is min. That is a minimum constraint. If you want to apply some minimum value for any parameter, then you can use this minimum constraint. If you want to invoke the first action method, if the ID number is greater than 10, then we can use this min constraint. Go to Visual Studio. Here, the minimum value of ID will be 10. So in this route, again put colon, stop the execution, then type min parenthesis, then minimum value will be 10. This method will not work if the ID is less than 10. Okay. Now run this app again. Here, change the ID greater than 10. Let's say 16. Here we got the output from first method. Now change the ID less than 10. Here we got the output from second method. So first method is not working. As I told earlier, by default all the value will be treated as string. That's why we got the output from second method. Now third constraint is max. It's like min constraint. Along with min constraint, we can also specify the max constraint. This max constraint also takes one parameter which is used to specify the max value that can be applied to the parameter. If you want the ID in the URL should not be greater than 20, then you can use max constraint. So go to Visual Studio, stop the execution. In the URL, put colon max 20. Run this app. Now enter 17, then press enter. Here we got the output from first method. Now enter some integer value greater than 20, let's say 28. We got the output from second method. Then first method will not work because max number is 20. If the ID is greater than 20, then this first method will not work. Next constraint is range. To instead of using this minimum and max constraint, we can use range constraint. This range constraint takes two parameters. First parameter is the minimum value. Second parameter is the maximum value. Let's modify the route here. Stop the execution. Range 10, 20. That's it. Run this app again. If I enter ID value below 10, first method will not work. If I enter ID greater than 10, first method will work. If I entered ID greater than 20, first method will not work. So we got the output from second method. Now next constraint is minimum length. This constraint is used to specify the minimum length of the string parameter. For example, go to Visual Studio. Here in the second method, if the length of the input parameter is greater than 5 characters, then only this method will work. So we can, in this situation, we can do this very easily by using min length constraint, which takes one parameter to specify the minimum length. Now let's update the route here. Put colon, then min length 5. Run this app. Refresh this page. This time we got the error. To invoke the first method, ID should be minimum 10 and maximum 20. That's why first method will not work. In the second method, minimum length is 5. So second method also not working. Now change the ID value. Let's enter minimum 5 character. Then press enter. Here we got the output from second method. Now let's enter 3 character only. So we got the error. Let's enter above 5 character. We got the output from second method. Okay. Now next constraint is max length. Just like minimum length constraint, we can use max length constraint to specify the maximum length of the string parameter. See here, this method takes one string parameter. If you want to invoke this method when the input parameter is less than 5 character only. So we can do this by using max length constraint. Let's modify the URL here. Stop the execution. So instead of this min length, now we can use max length. So maximum length is 5. Okay, now run this app again. Now refresh this page. This time we got the error because maximum character is 5. So now enter below 5 character. We got the output from second method. Next constraint is length. The length constraint is basically used to specify the exact length of a string. If I am using length 5, it means there must be exactly 5 characters in that string. If the string contains less than 5 or greater than 5, then it will not work. Let's modify the route here. Now we will use length constraint. Length is 5. Save and run this app again. Now let's type exact 5 characters. We got the output from second method. Now enter 4 or 3 characters. We got the error. If I enter more than 5 characters, so this time also we got the error. Okay. Now next constraint is alpha. If you want any parameter to accept only alphabets, then you need to use alpha constraint. Let's modify the route here. Replace this length with alpha. Stop the execution and run this app again. Now enter only alpha characters. Here alpha stands for uppercase or lowercase alphabet letters. Let's enter only alphabets. We got the output from second method, string method. Now enter alphanumeric. We got error. Then only numeric. We got the error. Okay. Next constraint is required. If you want to make any variable as mandatory, then you can use required constraint. Next one is rejects. Rejects, using this constraint, we can also validate the value of a particular variable. It takes one parameter and we can specify expression or function to validate. Let's see how it works. Stop the execution. Let's update the route here. Rejects. Inside this, we have to pass actual expression. Let's say a. Here we will write the simple expression. Okay. If the string starts with A and it should followed by B or C, then only this method will work. If the string doesn't start with A or if it starts with A but not followed by B or C character, then this method will not work. Now save and run this application. Update the URL here. Let's enter ABC. Here we got the output from second method. Let's enter ADCF. Here we got the error. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you there in next video. Bye.